Back. It's 23 minutes, 24 minutes at the hour. And again, we're at the ASU Innovation Summit here in San Diego. Joining me now is Bill Goodwyn, who is the president of Discovery Education. Bill, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. So again, I want to remind our audience before we begin our conversation, Bill, that we're open to taking questions, that you can use the text window. You can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a video question. We'll do some vetting if you have questions for Bill about some of the stuff that we're discussing. So I want to open our conversation, Bill, give you the shameless self-promotional opportunity to tell our audience a bit about Discovery Education.
Sure. Well, I'll try not to do it so shamelessly, but in any case, Discovery Education, many people are familiar with Discovery Communications. That's the media company. We have Discovery Channel, Animal Planet Science Channel, but what Discovery Education is the education arm of Discovery Communications. And what we do is we actually partner with K-12 districts in the U.S. and also in the U.K., but primarily help them shift from a print to a digital learning environment. And the reason that's important is if you think about today's students, right? They're consuming content fundamentally different than any previous generation of learners. So we want to engage today's students, and we need to do that through digital media. And digital media with professional development, when you combine that, you can engage students in a new, innovative way, and ultimately, the goal is to ultimately improve student outcomes.
So let me begin just to clarify what you mean by digital media. The conversation about going digital means lots of different things to lots of different people.
Yes.
For example, if you look at the traditional textbook publishers, many of whom are here at this conference, they will tell you they are no longer a publisher in the way that we used to think about that. They got rid of their printing presses years ago. You know, one way or another, they're kind of we're in the learning science business. We bring digital curricular resources. Yeah, we still do provide print products. You're talking about media in the sense video to a little more and beyond video as well?
Yes, it's multimodal, right? So It's not just video, it's interactives, it's animation, it's games. And what we're
it's screen based.
It's screen based, but ultimately it's all embedded, right? So we're not taking a traditional print resource and then trying to digitize it or creating a PDF. We were digital first. So we started from the ground building a full digital environment. And there's a number of things that you can do with digital media, digital content that you just can't do in a print world. And so, for example, with digital, you can update immediately, right? Your content, no matter what the topic is, you can immediately do that. You can also modify it to support state standards, or with science last year, NGSS, or Common Core.
I'm sorry, NGSS for those who aren't used to the acronym?
Yeah, there are new science standards that are put in place last year. Common Core, that's another standard that was put in place. So digital allows you to adapt and be flexible, but there's a number of other things that benefit students as well. So here's a perfect example. We have a digital textbook in science, and a couple of years ago I got a note from a superintendent in Texas. It's a very, very small district, very Hispanic, large population. Well, the student is bilingual. She's a fourth grade student. She brought a digital textbook home, and we have a digital replacement, a textbook digital service that's replacing printed textbook. She brought the digital textbook home, and with a touch of a button, she was able to translate it from English to Spanish. Now, the reason that's important is because her father doesn't speak any English. So all of a sudden, for the first time ever, her father could help her with her homework.
Yeah, there are a number of stories of just that, students who are bilingual in their day life as opposed to their family life, or technology conversions who act as a catalyst in terms of helping their parents in lots of different ways.
That's right. And another great thing about digital, it allows you to personalize the learning process. So for example, we have embedded assessment, we have embedded dashboarding, so teachers can determine where each student is at a given time with a given topic. So the challenge is students learn at different paces and they learn in different ways. But the challenge is we've been teaching the same way for the last 50 years, assuming that everyone learns at the same stage, the same way, at the same pace. And that's that's not the case. And so digital allows you to individualize the instruction. So while some students may need remediation in a certain area, some may be able to accelerate to the next topic. And you can also decide what kind of learner that individual is to best meet their needs. Those are the things that digital can do, which now allows us to treat individual students like individuals for the first time.
I want to look at the flip side of the topic you were just addressing.
Sure.
And that's not so much the students, but the teachers.
Yes.
Okay. We had a conversation yesterday with the president of Teachers College from Columbia University, also the president of McGraw-Hill K-12 Higher Education, talking about the issue of, in one sense, the gap,
Yeah.
teacher education. How much, for example, in the case of the materials that you and others bring to market, to school these days, how far ahead is that in terms of the teacher preparation for folks who are either first-time teachers coming out with bachelor's degrees or going back for master's degrees or additional certification?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question because, as I was stating earlier, when we help districts make a shift from print to digital, it's not about technology. It's not just about content. What we do is we provide really three things: the professional development, the content, and a communication strategy. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the professional development is really the critical part. What we're not doing is creating a technology initiative, right? You just can't simply give teachers a bunch of iPads or devices and give them to students and say, go teach better. What we need to do as an industry is make sure professional development is a key part of this. And that's why we made a decision a long time ago. We'll never put a digital textbook in the marketplace out to a district, within schools or within educators without embedded professional development, because it has to work. And the most important element of a successful digital transformation is making sure that teachers are properly supported to deliver great instructional practice. So it is absolutely mission critical that the professional development is a key part of it. And that's what we focus in on. A lot of the other companies aren't really focused on professional development. Look, the margins aren't good. It's not a great growth business, but for us, it's absolutely mission imperative and critical that every single digital initiative and digital resource that we put out with digital textbooks, we support with professional development, because we have to support the teachers to make sure that you've got a successful digital implementation. And when you do that, you see success in districts all over the country.
Part of the conversation about supporting teachers with professional development is not only about the resource, but also the conversation about the data. There's a lot of conversation at this conference about data, about evidence. Mr. Gates and the Gates Foundation are very much talking about metrics of success.
Yes.
Most teachers aren't trained at data points. We can do quizzes, we can do assessment, we talk about sort of finer level learning metrics, individually or in terms of the aggregation of that. Real questions begin to emerge of, how do I interpret these data? One data point should not be definitive, should not be determinate. And understanding, in fact, data are really about building a narrative, that the individual data points become a gestalt that really build the narrative in terms of understanding either the group experience or the individual experience. Is that part of the training as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, within the textbook services, for example, you have formative assessment. So you're not making a snap judgment on, is that individual learner, not going to be able to be successful, at a later date. It's formative assessment so the teachers can understand where each student is within a given topic and help support that additional engagement and additional learning by providing additional resources while other students can go off on a different path. So it's really the dashboarding piece more than anything else to help formative assessment, so the teachers have the support and resources to see how engaged and how effective what their teaching is, and how much the students are receiving it, understanding it, and in being engaged in it.
You mentioned Common Core.
Yes.
You open the door. So, this is one of the.
Can I shut it?
No, but it's part of the landscape. And It's going to be part of the political landscape as well.
That's right.
And this is part of the challenge that folks in your industry confront in terms of the ebb and flow. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about Common Core. This is not a federal initiative. It's actually an initiative of the governors. Some who were for it before they were against it, and are uncertain what to do with it, depending on the political winds. But that also puts dramatic pressure on anybody in the curricular content business, in terms of trying to understand the demands of individual states, and particularly the influence of some states which are disproportionate. My focus isn't, in terms of my professional work, isn't K-12, but I know that, for example, largely perceived that 4 states, Texas, New York, California, and Florida, largely determine a large part of the content that goes into K-12 curricula.
That's right.
And so what does that mean in terms of the resources that you bring to market, in terms of the testing and the presentation?
Well, look, again, with our digital content, we have to make sure we're set to standards. And so whether it's state standards, whether it's Common Core, the great thing about digital, you can make sure you adapt to different standards and as they change. So we're able to adapt to Common Core, but we also can, our products and services can be modified for state standards as well. So look, we're not going to make the decisions on, whether a state is supportive of Common Core or.
I realize that's not what you do. You're there to support the the policy decisions and to bring resources forward.
That's right. And we'll align to whatever standards that are best suited for the district and the state. Look, we all believe we should have higher standards. We didn't look at Common Core as curriculum. We looked at it as higher standards. And I think everyone believes in that. So whether some districts call it, Common Core, or they have their own acronym, I think everybody wants to have high standards. But again, I think unfortunately the term and the focus has been somewhat politicized, as you just mentioned. But again, for us, it's working with the district and the states and whatever standards that ultimately are used. We're going to align ourselves with those districts. And again, for us, as a company, we have alignment, and our focus is really, we have a simple motto. It's called, it's doing well by doing good. And by that, I mean, look, as a company, we don't do well unless our district partners do well. So if the district partners' goals are to increase science engagement or science scores or whatever the district goals are, we have to align ourselves with the district, because I think it's critically important going forward that if you're going to be successful in the K-12 space, you need to make sure you're demonstrating success and improving outcomes. So for us, it's really important that we do that to be successful in K-12. I think historically, some companies could look at the K-12 marketplace and simply provide products and services, sell them to districts, and they really weren't worried about efficacy. But I think to be successful in this, in this environment, the stakes are so high that anyone that's going to be successful, you have to make sure that you're partnering with districts and demonstrating success in order to have a sustainable business model and one that's going to be utilized and continue to scale.
That's great. I want to shift our conversation a little bit, Bill. Part of the goal of doing these conversations, these interviews here at the Innovation Conference is, in one sense, to connect with the conversations and the public presentations here in San Diego with folks in schools and on college campuses. To that end, you had mentioned, as we were having a little bit of conversation before we turned on the cameras and the mics, that you've been to this conference a number of times. As you think about that connection and the work that Discovery does, and how connected is this to the real world? Some would say the in-the-trench experience of teachers in terms of the conversations, the presentations, and ultimately the impact of what happens here in schools.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, there's the nice thing about the conference. I think it does a couple things. One is it really gives you a glimpse into the future of education. I think companies here are focused on how do we improve teaching and learning, and whether it's in K-12, whether it's higher ed, lifelong learning, whatever it might be. It's fascinating to see some of the technology and the personalization, adaptivity and the great innovation that's going on. But for me, there's also some great real-world examples of some of the learning that you can take back. On Monday, there was a panel. Baltimore County Public Schools, their leadership and their superintendent, their group was here. Dallas Dance is the superintendent, and his whole team was up on stage talking about digital transformation and really what that implementation plan looks like. And they have a really thoughtful plan that they shared with everyone in the audience. And again, it's not a technology initiative, it's a learning initiative. So professional development, critical part of it, right? The right content, the right access and infrastructure, getting the community support on board, parent groups to make sure they were aligned. So it was really great to hear the real world examples of some of the innovation that's going on today, and they can share that with others. And the nice thing is you see pockets of innovation, and school districts and leaders are sharing that information. So that was something that I was really, really excited to see, because there's a lot of takeaways that you can get from attending some of the sessions.
Okay. Shift a little bit one more time in terms of a closing question. As a business executive, somebody who's very embedded in the education community in terms of working in education, there's an election going on.
Sure.
That casts a large shadow over what's going to happen in this country for the next several months and obviously beyond, whatever the outcome. Independent of the candidates, parties, I think it's fair to say that there's often a lot more posturing than there is policy in the public conversations going into elections, through the primaries and what happened coming out of the conventions. Were you at, regardless of party, regardless of the source, if you had to write down a couple of notes, what are the three things that the candidates, whoever they are, that emerge from the convention, really should attend to in the public policy conversation about education in the election this fall?
I mean, well, look, for me, I think the most important one is really supporting the teacher profession. Providing not just the tools, but the resources to support, great instructional practice. So making sure that we're not only supporting current teachers, but also how do we attract the best and the brightest, individuals to move into the teaching profession? How do we support and improve workforce or workplace conditions for educators? That to me is critical, because the number one factor in whether students are going to have a solid and a prosperous education is the quality of the teacher. So I think making sure we support teachers is number one paramount. Number two, I think closing the digital divide. It's important that we really focus on access for all. And I think there's a number of initiatives that have happened and continue to happen. There's additional funding for E-rate. There's a number of initiatives going on to make sure everyone has access. So whether it's free or low cost connectivity to those families and homes that can't afford it, I think that's very important. And the third thing is, how do we prepare students to have career and college readiness? And it's, everyone should have higher education. That doesn't necessarily have to mean college. It could mean a number of things.
Some kind of post-secondary opportunity.
Absolutely. And as part of that, if you look at the job skill gap, we're going to have in the workforce, we already have one. It's going to get wider unless we're really educating our kids for the jobs of tomorrow. And that STEM education is a big area. Part of what we're doing is working with Fortune 500s to help support that public-private partnership, so we can bring STEM resources to increase engagement to students at middle school and high school around STEM learning. 3M, Siemens, Alcoa, the number of companies that are doing great work. So helping, having the government and education step in to make sure we're supporting some of those initiatives.
As allies instead of adversaries.
That's correct.
Great.
Yes.
Bill Goodwyn from Discovery Education, thanks very much for joining us today. Much appreciate your time. Hope the conference is going well for you. All right, and Bill's going to exit. Next in is going to be Adrian Sanner, who is I'm looking at my notes, I should know this. He's the Chief Academic Technology Officer for ASU Online. We'll be right back with Adrian. Bill, again, thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you very much.